A machine so silent it felt alive, an emblem so rare it became a crown for kings, queens, billionaires, and world leaders. For more than a century, Rolls Royce has glided like a phantom through history, a moving throne. But behind the shine lies another story, a story of obsession and betrayal, of collapse and survival, of rivalries that shook empires and a crown that nearly slipped away forever. Who could have imagined that Rolls Royce, born from the vision of just two men, would one day stand shoulder to shoulder with the world's greatest empires? At a time when people could not even imagine such a brand existing, they built it from nothing. And today, Rolls Royce doesn't just carry a name, it carries a legacy. It soared with creations, hailed as the best in the world. It powered nations through world wars with engines that roared above the skies. Torn apart by corporate wars, challenged by Bentley, Maybach, and Ferrari, and now forced to confront its greatest test, yet an electric future it was never built for. From dusty workshops in 19th century England to billionaires' garages in 2025. This is not just the story of a car. This is the rise, the fall, and the rebirth of two men who started it all, Henry Royce and Charles Rolls. Imagine you have just £20 in your pocket, sleeping in a tiny room above your workshop, and the world knows nothing of your name. Now imagine 100 years later, your name becomes the crown that billionaires fight to own. This is not just a business story. This is the story of two men who refuse to accept their fate. Henry Royce's story did not begin with luxury, but with bankruptcy. Born in 1863, he grew up in a family struggling to keep their small flour mill alive. By the time Henry was just 4, the business had failed and debts mounted. At 9, tragedy struck again. His father died, leaving the family with nothing but unpaid bills. Instead of school, Henry's childhood was filled with work. He scared birds from crops, sold newspapers on London's streets, and delivered telegrams for just a few pennies. But Henry's determination was stronger than his circumstances. His aunt scraped together enough money for him to join an apprenticeship at the Great Northern Railway. There he discovered the world of engineering. In the shed of a family friend, George Yarrow, he practiced with tools late into the night, building miniature brass wheelbarrows that revealed both his skill and obsession with precision. By 17, Henry was working for a tool-making firm in Leeds, earning just a penny an hour. Later, at the Electric Light and Power Company in Liverpool, he sacrificed meals to spend more time experimenting with machinery. To sharpen his knowledge, he attended night classes in engineering at the City and Guilds Institute. His effort paid off when, at only 19, he became chief electrician at the Maxim Western Company. But once again, fate turned against him. The company collapsed in 1884, leaving Henry jobless. This time, instead of finding another employer, Henry decided to build something of his own. With only £20 to his name, he partnered with his friend Ernest Claremont, who added £50. Together they rented a tiny workshop at 1 Cook Street in Manchester, living in a single room above their shop. Their new venture was called F.H. Royce & Company. They started small crafting simple electric fittings and doorbells. The product sold fast, and soon they were producing generators and even electric cranes. Amid the success, their partnership grew even closer. Henry married Minnie Punt, while Ernest married her sister Edith, turning business partners into family. From a malnourished child working the streets of London to a self-made engineer with a thriving company, Henry Royce had proven what obsession and grit could achieve. While Henry Royce was clawing his way up from poverty, another young man was living a very different life. Charles Stuart Rolls was born in 1877 at Berkeley Square, London, into one of Britain's most privileged families. His father, John Rolls, was the first Baron Langattock, and his mother, Lady Georgiana Rolls, came from wealth and status. The family owned vast estates in Monmouthshire, Wales, including the Grand Hendray estate. From the very beginning, Rolls was surrounded by luxury and opportunity. He had access to the best education and the freedom to chase any interest he desired. But unlike many aristocratic sons, Charles was drawn not to leisure, but to machines. At Cambridge University, he studied mechanical and applied science, earning the nickname Dirty Rolls because he was always tinkering with engines and covered in grease. By the age of 18, Charles was already one of the first Britons to own a car, a Peugeot Phaeton, purchased in Paris. He quickly developed a passion for motoring, and with financial backing from his father, he opened C.S. Rolls and Company, one of Britain's earliest car dealerships, importing French and Belgian cars for England's wealthy elite. But Charles was more than just a businessman. He was a thrill-seeker. He set an unofficial land speed record of 83 miles per hour, and in 1903, he raced in the notorious Paris to Madrid competition where over 30 drivers and spectators were killed. His love for adventure extended beyond the road. Charles became one of Britain's earliest aviators, completing over 170 balloon flights. He was the second man in Britain to earn a pilot's license and made more than 200 flights in a Wright Flyer, cementing his place as one of aviation's pioneers. Meanwhile, Henry Royce had just completed 3 prototypes of his own car, the Royce 10. One went to himself, another to his partner Ernest Claremont, and the third to a customer who was so impressed that he arranged an introduction to Charles Rolls. Their handshake in 1904 sealed a partnership that would change history. Together they presented their first car, the Rolls Royce 10 horsepower, at the Paris Salon. Only 16 were ever built, but it marked the birth of a legend. Just 2 years later came the Silver Ghost, the car that redefined motoring. After a 15,000-mile endurance run, its engine was so smooth that a glass of water balanced on top did not spill a drop. From that moment, Rolls and Royce were no longer just men, they were a brand, a symbol, and soon an empire. But what happened in that meeting changed everything. When Rolls sat in Royce's car, he felt something he had never experienced before: absolute silence. No rattling, no vibrations, just perfection. One man had money and connections. The other had genius and obsession. Together they became unstoppable. For all their early glory, the Rolls-Royce story was never without shadows. In July 1910, only 6 years after the famous handshake that built the company, Charles Rolls was killed in a tragic plane crash at just 32 years old. The loss left Henry Royce to carry the company forward alone. Yet Royce himself was frail. Years of poor nutrition and relentless work had damaged his health. Often too ill to visit the factory, he continued sketching ideas from his bedside. In 1914, when the First World War broke out, he finally turned to aircraft engines, designing the legendary Rolls-Royce Eagle. By the 1920s, the brand's reputation was untouchable. Demand for their cars was so overwhelming that there was a 3-year backlog. A new factory opened in Springfield, Massachusetts, producing nearly 3,000 vehicles over a decade. In 1930, Henry Royce was knighted for his contribution to engineering. Even on his deathbed in 1933, he was sketching designs. His final drawing was of a shock absorber, scribbled on an envelope and sent to the factory. Decades later, in the 1970s, disaster struck. The company's ambitious RB211 jet engine project spiraled out of control, costs exploded, and in 1971, Rolls-Royce was forced into bankruptcy. The crisis was so severe that the British government had to step in, nationalizing the company to keep it alive. For years, Rolls-Royce cars survived under different ownerships, but the 1990s brought another storm. In a fierce corporate battle, Volkswagen acquired Rolls-Royce Motors, including the factory and designs, while BMW strategically secured the rights to the Rolls-Royce name and badge.
German car giant BMW was always favourite to buy Rolls-Royce. Once its parent company Vickers made it plain it didn't have enough money to invest in the next generation of limousines.
In 2003, BMW launched the reborn Rolls-Royce motor cars at a new home in Goodwood, England. The first modern Phantom rolled out under BMW's stewardship, blending German engineering resources with the timeless British identity that customers demanded. From the ashes of tragedy, collapse, and corporate wars, Rolls-Royce had once again survived. But its crown was never guaranteed. It had to be fought for again and again. The rebirth began with the Phantom 7, launched in 2003. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement. The Phantom re-established Rolls-Royce as the standard of modern ultra-luxury. Silent, powerful, and obsessively crafted. Its success silenced critics who doubted whether BMW could respect the brand's heritage. By the early 2000s, Rolls-Royce transformed itself from carmaker to storyteller. Special collection cars became rolling myths. The 2011 Aviator, honoring Charles Rolls' passion for flight, and the 2013 Celestial Phantom, a one-off masterpiece that recreated the night sky over Goodwood with 576 twinkling fiber optic stars and interiors glittering with real diamonds. It wasn't just a car, it was art on wheels. The lineup also grew bolder. The Wraith Coupe and Dawn convertible brought youth and glamour to the brand, expanding its appeal to a new generation of drivers. The Phantom 8, unveiled in 2017, was hailed as the quietest and most technologically advanced Rolls ever built. Then came the boldest leap yet, the Cullinan SUV in 2018. At first controversial among purists, it soon became a global bestseller from Dubai to Los Angeles, proving that Rolls-Royce could adapt to new tastes without losing its aura of exclusivity. By the late 2010s, Rolls-Royce had transformed from a fading legend into a lifestyle brand. Most buyers already owned 7 to 8 cars. Collectors had dozens. Every Rolls had become more than transportation. It was a statement, an heirloom, and often a form of wealth preservation. As the 2020s began, Rolls-Royce was no longer just surviving. It was thriving. Year after year, the company broke sales records, with order books stretching months in advance. For the ultra-wealthy, waiting was not a burden, but part of the privilege. In 2023, Rolls-Royce sold over 6,000 cars worldwide, a record for the brand. While its numbers were smaller than Bentley's 13,500, Rolls-Royce operated at a much higher price tier, commanding the top of the ultra-luxury market. In fact, its average transaction price exceeded £500,000, thanks to bespoke options. The stakes were higher than ever. Rivals pressed harder, Bentley under Volkswagen, Maybach under Mercedes, Aston Martin with its British glamour, and performance legends like Ferrari and Lamborghini chasing the wallets of adrenaline-hungry billionaires. At the same time, a new wave of challengers emerged. Tesla, Lucid, and even rumors of an Apple car hinted that the ultra-luxury crown might not only be contested by heritage brands, but also by Silicon Valley's tech titans. Today, a 25-year-old crypto billionaire parks his Cullinan next to a 70-year-old oil tycoon's Phantom. A tech founder customizes a Spectre with AI-inspired patterns. Rolls-Royce is no longer just for old money, it's for anyone bold enough to demand perfection. Yet prestige came with controversy. Rolls-Royce's secrecy around its customers fueled both mystique and criticism. And yet, the allure endured. A Rolls-Royce was not simply a car, it was obsession turned into metal, survival transformed into art, and ambition polished into myth. From Henry Royce's £20 workshop to billionaires' garages in 2025, the brand had risen, fallen, and risen again. But one question now looms larger than any diamond on its dashboard. Can Rolls-Royce remain the best car in the world in an electric century, where silence and perfection are no longer theirs alone? For more than a century, a silent machine carried the noise of power. It survived a founder's fall from the sky, a partner's final sketch from a sickbed, and a bankruptcy so brutal that even governments had to step in. From the silver ghost that defined silence, to the Phantom that restored a legend, to the Cullinan that conquered new roads, and the Spectre, the first electric whisper of tomorrow, this crown has slipped, but it never fell. Today, rivals close in. Bentley, Maybach, Ferrari and Lamborghini fight for the crown, while Tesla, Lucid, and Apple prepare to rewrite the rules of luxury in volts and code. But one question lingers: can Rolls-Royce remain the best car in the world in an electric century when silence is no longer its secret? Whatever the answer, one truth endures. This was never just about cars. It was about obsession, survival, and the audacity to turn a £20 dream into an emblem the world still bows to. And perhaps the greatest lesson: Henry Royce started with £20 and a dream too big for his circumstances. Charles Rolls was born into privilege, but chose purpose over comfort. One was an engineer, one was an adventurer, but both refused to settle. This is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the next chapter, written in Goodwood, judged by history, and forever signed by two names: Henry Royce and Charles Rolls.